Good evening. This is my Wednesday night Bible study. My name is Douglas Griffin. We are going through the book of Matthew, and we're now in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is at the Garden of Gethsemane, and let us recap from last week. Well, so as you know, he did the Passover, even though it wasn't Passover, it was the day before Passover. But he kind of showed them, if I were going to be with you in Passover, this is what everything meant. But I'm actually going to be the Passover. So he says, let's go out. And he's talking with them along the way. And yet last week we went over all the things that Jesus said along the way that John recorded. It's not in the Synoptic Gospels. They just jump right to the Synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They just jump right to the Garden of Gethsemane. So now we're in the Garden of Gethsemane. The disciples have made him a little crazy because the last thing that John records him saying to them is, for a little while I won't be with you, and then in a little while I'll be back. And John has them saying, what is he talking about? He won't be with us for a little while. And Jesus is like, oh my God, I've been going over this for 6 months. Every day I keep explaining I'm about to be crucified. Now, Peter took this as a challenge. He totally misconstrued, and he's thinking, oh no, I won't let this happen. And when Jesus says, get thee behind me, Satan, he says, oh, you think I'm Satan because I'm going to let this happen. But no, I am not going to let it happen. So Peter secretly has a sword with him because he's going to prevent anybody from betraying Jesus that night, not understanding that all that's supposed to happen. And sometimes that's how we are. There's stuff that we're fighting against. No, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to stand up for God. And it turns out that's exactly what God wanted to happen, and it's going to happen. And then you go, oh, that happened and it wasn't that bad. So Peter's prepared to pull out his sword. He's going to challenge whoever's going to betray Jesus that night. So they get to the garden. Jesus says to 8 of the disciples, you guys stay here. And then you, Peter, James, and John, you come with me. So this is where we were leaving off. In Matthew 26, verse 36 says, then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, which is the eight of the disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, which is James and John. And he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed, even to death. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, so stay here and watch with me. He's actually, now, what are they watching for? He literally is saying, stay here and watch what I do. He's going to demonstrate to them how to handle this type of situation. Okay, so he says, you stay here and watch with me what happens. And says, and he went a little farther. Luke specifically says, when he came to this place in Luke 22:40, verse 40, when he came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter temptation. Because you're going to be, now, did he mean you're going to be tempted to sleep? That's how a lot of us translate that. You're going to be tempted to sleep, but I want you to stay awake. But he's saying, pray that you may not enter into temptation to bail on this whole thing. Because you're going to be tempted, because that's what he had told them. You're all going to deny me. They're like, no, we would never do that. So when he's saying, pray that you not be tempted, because he's like, this is the only way you're going to avoid denying me and deserting me, is that you have to stay in prayer, have to stay in contact with God so that he can help you, because stuff's about to blow up in this joint, and you're about to freak out. So that's what he's telling them to pray. That's what they're going to be tempted to do. And he was drawn from them about a stone's throw, it says in Luke. And he knelt down and prayed. So he's just a stone, not a little pebble. Like, I don't know, he's 12 feet away. So John can hear everything that Jesus is saying. John never slept. Peter slept, but John did not sleep. Because John records everything that Jesus said and did. Okay, so going on, Matthew chapter 26, verse 29, the second part of verse 29, he says, and he fell on his face and he prayed, saying, oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. So last week we were discussing what he meant by this cup. Now, earlier, John has him say, a week earlier, he says to them, "Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say?" Because he knows what's about to come up. So it's a full week earlier as they're approaching Jerusalem, and it's all about to happen. He says, "My soul is troubled, but what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose, I came to this hour." So I know. So he's like, "Am I going to say, Father, deliver me from this hour?" No, I know what's about to happen. So when he's saying, "Let this cup pass me by," it doesn't seem logical that he's saying that it's the cross, that's the cup. We went over several scriptures where it's the cup of God's fury. In the Old Testament scriptures it talked about it's the wrath that's about to happen to all the other people. Because remember when they were weeping for Jesus, he says, "Don't weep for me, weep for your children." I, what I'm about to do is a good thing. What's about to happen to you and your children, the horror that's about to come up on, the wrath because of your rejection of me, because you've been waiting all this time for me, all these prophecies, and now actual Jesus showed up, the Messiah showed up, and you rejected him and put him on the cross and killed him. Because of that rejection, this consequence is about to come up to you, and that's like, oh man, that he was saying that cup, if that could pass me by. Okay, so the reason he had Peter, James, and John come with him is because earlier in the week, Mama had come and said, they want to drink of your cup. In Matthew 20, verse 22, it says, "But Jesus answered and says, you do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup I'm about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I'm about to be baptized with?" And they said to him, "Oh, we're able to drink that cup." So that's specifically had just come up in a previous conversation just a few days earlier. So now when he's saying this cup, let this cup, he's saying it loud enough for James and John. They're the ones that asked about it. So they're there. And he's saying, remember I talked about that cup that you said you're going to be able to bear? Because remember Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink of my cup. And you're going to be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with." So you are going to drink of this cup, which is, you're going to witness the wrath. You're going to witness two things: the persecution coming on you, and see how they're crucifying me. Well, they're going to do the same thing to you. They're going to persecute you. They're going to stone you. James was the first of the apostles who was killed. John prophesied about the wrath. Either he wrote the book of Revelation after Jerusalem had been destroyed and he saw it all happen, or he wrote the book of Revelation before it happened, and the book of Revelation is about what's about to happen. But either way, all the wrath that Jesus has been talking about, John was witness to. So yeah, the cup that I'm about to drink of, which is the consequences that are about to come in Jerusalem and the persecution, and you two specifically are going to be the beginning and the end of that. Because James was the first apostle killed, John was the last apostle killed. And so you certainly are going to drink with this cup. So let me show you how to deal with it. So when he says watch, he's saying, watch what I do. Because remember in Jeremiah 25:15, we read last week, for thus says the Lord God of Israel to me, take this wine cup of fury from my hand and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. And so that's the cup that he was supposed to take. Now, back to Matthew chapter 26, verse 40. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" Mark, who spent the last part of Peter's life with him, Mark went to Rome. He was with Peter, and he was writing down his his gospel, as Peter was dictating to him everything that happened, right? So we know that Mark got the majority of his information from Peter. In Mark's version of this, it says, then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "Simon, are you sleeping?" So in Peter's version, he specifically called out his name because Peter was the one who was sleeping. "Could you not watch 1 hour?" Okay. There is a reason that Peter was sleeping. He wasn't bored. He wasn't, man, it's just really tired. And I know that all this stuff's about to go down. There is a sleep that comes from the burden of too much grief, too much sorrow. And sometimes it will just knock you out. Your body is needing to recover and it will put you to sleep like it's putting you in a cocoon so that you can recover from the weight of the grief that's weighing on you. There are two examples of that in the Bible where people should not have gone to sleep, but they did. You're like, considering what all they're going through, how could they just fall asleep? One was in 1 Kings chapter 19, talking about Elijah. Okay. It says, beginning with the first verse of 1 Kings chapter 19, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, did you just call my prophet? Saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So one of us is going to be dead by tomorrow at this time. It's going to be me or you. And when he saw that, he arose and he ran for his life because Jezebel be killing people. She don't be playing. So, and he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. So he ran for his life with the servant, then he left his servant there. So, well, maybe she'll kill you first. Then he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down there under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die and says, oh, it is enough now, Lord, take my life, because he wanted to bail. It was too much, right? Take my life, for I'm no better than my father's. Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, get up, boy. Well, it said, arise and eat. But so he's panicked. He ran for his life. Lord, I just want to die. Boom, and fell asleep. Not because he was bored. The weight of it was too much. And your body will just knock you out. And Peter in that garden was under so much anguish because this is all about to fall apart. Jesus is saying people are going to betray him and he doesn't have any faith in me and he might crucify. And I've heard people were saying in the village, because they were about, everybody knew that they're about to grab Jesus and they just didn't know where he was hanging out. And Peter's got this, it's all on me. I've got to, rescue him. And Jesus has no faith in me. And Jesus thinks that I'm going to be, boom. And Peter was out from the weight of it. You sleep now. You sleep. He's out from the weight of the grief, not because he was just bored. Okay. The other person famously who went to sleep in the midst of like the incredible trauma was Jonah. In Jonah chapter 1, verse 3-5, it says, but Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish, right? Tarshish, from the presence of the Lord. So God had said to Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh and give them this message. And Jonah's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And so, which is so funny because God's already, what he has for us, he's already seen us do. God's not making stuff up. He's not, I hope you do this. He knows you're going to do it. And you can run from your calling, but he'll just bring us, first of all, he'll bring a storm to stop you. Some storms come up in our lives because there's 3 different types of storms in the Bible. There's the storm that comes and stops us when we're headed in the wrong direction. And it's like, man, nothing I was doing was working, and that's God. God sent that storm to stop us. And some other time I'll talk about the other 2 types of storm, but there's like 3 types of storms that send you on your way, that give you direction. And there's also storms that will stop you when you're in the wrong direction. So it says that he went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and he went down into it to go to them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He's thinking, I can just fool God. It says, but the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea. So God sent that storm. This was not from the devil. The Bible takes claim of it. God's proud of it. I did it. So that the ship was about to be broken up. Then the mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship, had laid down, and he was fast asleep. Yeah, the storm is coming up and it's raising, the ship is rocking, and I'm running from God, and he's trying to bail on what God has called him to do. right? He's trying to escape it. Elijah was trying to escape. Oh, I'm in trouble now. She's about to kill. And the weight of it was just too much. This is where Peter was like, oh man, it's too much. So, but with Jesus wasn't mad that he knew what time it was. It's like midnight around this time. I need you to watch how I handle this. Okay. So it says, watch and pray in Matthew chapter 26:41. So he's specifically talking to Peter because James, John, they're awake. John's recording all of this. He knows what's going on. It's Peter. And Peter's the main one who's going to act crazy. He's going to deny God, Jesus the loudest. Okay, so it says, watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And Paul enumerates this he talks about this in Galatians chapter 5, verse 16 and 17 about the war between the flesh and the spirit. Because there's a lot of things that your spirit wants to do, but your flesh is warring against you. In fact, he says that in Galatians 5:16, I say then, walk in the spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Well, how do you walk in the spirit? Keep connected. That's what Jesus was trying to tell them. Keep praying. Keep talking to God. Watch and pray. Keep talking to God. And that's your lifeline. Don't just say a prayer at 5 in the morning and now you're just on your talk to God all day. As you're about to walk into the store, as you're going down the house, okay, Jesus, help me find the right cereal, please. And just keep talking. Okay, just don't help me not to break up my shoe and to this cashier who's just overcharging me for stuff. Keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. Okay, Jesus, help me find my car because I can't remember where I parked. Just have it running. Don't stop talking. It's not about God. You just show up for God once in the morning and then, oh, I did my duty to God. We should be just talking to him all day long. And that's what Jesus is trying to get them to do. Watch and pray that you don't fall into temptation, not the temptation of sleep, but the temptation of Baal. You're about to desert me. And the only way to avoid that is to stay connected. Okay. So he says, if you walk in the spirit, you won't fulfill the lust of the flesh, for the flesh lusts against the spirit and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. Your flesh wants to do everything that leads to death. Your spirit wants to do everything that leads to life. So they're always fighting each other. Your flesh says, 5 more donuts will not hurt you. They are soft and fluffy. How could that hurt you? 5 more will just make it an even dozen. And isn't that spiritual? Weren't there 12 disciples? Why can't you have 12 donuts? That's what your flesh is saying, and the spirit's saying, 1 more, no more. And so they're fighting against each other. The spirit's saying, and then have 5 carrots when you're done, and some vegetables. And the flesh is like, you don't have room for donut and vegetable because you had to choose. So there's always a fight going on, right? And so the way to not fulfill the lust of the flesh is to stay in the spirit, and walking in the spirit is just be constantly connected to God. Okay, so back to Matthew chapter 26. So verse 42, he says, again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Now, he's saying, well, okay, let me get to the third time. So he left them, and he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And verse 44 says, so he left them and went away again, and he prayed the third time. So this is 3 times that Jesus is having to pray this prayer. So I'm thinking, is there something significant about the fact that it was 3 times? Jesus went and asked God 3 times, if it's possible, let this cup pass by. And then he went back to God again. If it's possible, it's like, so was God hard of hearing? Or is there magic in the number 3? Because Paul prayed 3 times because he was being attacked by a person, and Paul says, I prayed 3 times. In fact, let's look at that, because this is one of those misunderstood scriptures. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 9. It says, unless I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me. So Paul exceeded Peter. I mean, Peter wrote and said, Paul says stuff that is beyond me. And I spent 3.5 years with Jesus. But Paul just knows things. It's incredible. But God gave Paul all these revelations of and his understanding of what all these scriptures meant, right? So he's saying, but unless I be exalted above measure, like everybody go, Paul, and just throw money at him, and there was sent a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan. So he says what it was. It was a messenger of Satan. It wasn't halitosis or the whooping cough or the calamatus, or it was a messenger of Satan to buffet me. That means repeatedly bump up against me, lest I be exalted above measure. Now concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So he's saying, because Paul's saying, this is wearing me down. This person, this messenger of Satan, this person is wearing me down. It's wearing me down. I'm ready to give up. It's making me weak. And the Lord's answer was, my grace is sufficient. My strength is made perfect in your weak. When you finally say, I can't handle this, Lord, I'm gonna have to give it over to you. He's like, yay, I've been waiting for you to give it over to me. Yes, you cannot handle that, but I can handle it. And there are times in our life you think, oh, I can't handle it anymore. And Jesus is like, I know you can't handle it. Let it go. I'll handle it for you. It's not up to you to try to, I can just tough it through. So Jesus, I'm giving this to you. It's too much for me. And he says, my grace is sufficient. What I've already provided for you is sufficient for you, because my strength is made perfect, is matured in your weakness, because that's when I really come strong. But as long as you're holding on, we can't both hold on. So when you let go, I'll grab on full strength. As long as you're holding on, I'm going to sit back and say, well, you got it. So he says, therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So it's like, yay, I can't handle this. So that means God's going to have to come through. And I can't handle this. That means God's going to have to come through. And I remember being with a friend of mine who is a new Christian, and we're driving and we're out in some road somewhere. And suddenly I got a flat tire. Or did I run out of gas? It'd be either one, because that was me. And it still is me. Bless my heart. So one of the two, I either ran out of gas or had a flat tire. But there was no call box anywhere nearby. There was no nothing nearby. And I only remember this because my friend was so amazed that I said this. So he reminds me that I said it. But I said, oh, good. God's going to do some kind of miracle. Like he says, and he was like, you're excited? I said, yeah, because we're away from a call box. We're out in this middle. So God obviously is going to do some incredible thing. So it's like, I knew I couldn't solve it. I can't solve this. Before cell phones. I cannot solve this. So I just said, well, Lord, I know you're going to do something, because yeah, I can't do, there's nothing I can do. So God's obviously going to do some big miracle. And I couldn't wait to see what it was going to be. In my weakness, I gloried, because if I could have figured out, I would have spent all I'll try this, then I'll go 6 feet over there. And it's like, no, I can't figure this out. So clearly God's going to do something. And within like 5 or 10 minutes, someone I knew drove by and pulled over. I saw your car. And because I was outside the car just praising God. And that's what drew his attention. The fact that I was up there going, oh, praise the Lord. Because I knew God was going to do something. And he saw me and pulled over and fixed it, whatever it was. Took me to the gas station, or fixed my tire, whatever. And then we just drove on. And when the situation was too much, that's when I knew, oh, good. Well, God's going to have to come through. That's why Paul says, therefore, I would boast in it says infirmities, but it means weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Because when it gets too much for me to handle, I know that God's going to have to handle it, because I can't. So that's not a bad thing. But I just want to clarify, for some people who are still thinking, but it said infirmities, and doesn't that mean sicknesses? No, it means weaknesses. And so wasn't Paul's thorn in his flesh? Wasn't it a disease? Wasn't it? So let's just go back one chapter, because Paul said it was a messenger of Satan sent to buffet me. He says what it was. But going back one chapter, 2 Corinthians, not Corinthians, Corinthians chapter 11, verse 10. He says, as the truth of Christ is in me, no one shall stop me from this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Because he was boasting actually about how these different people had been supporting him, and how, and he's boasting to the Corinthians because they hadn't done nothing to support him. But he was like, it's okay. God is supporting me through other people. You should have been doing it, but I don't want to give anybody an excuse. I don't want to ask you for money. I'm not asking anybody for money because then people start to attack me. Here's what he goes and says. He says, why? Because I do not love you. Is that why I'm not? Is that why I'm boasting? He says, God knows. No. He says, but what I do, I will also continue to do that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in the things of which they boast. See, we're apostles and we're going around and God is blessing us, but I don't ask you for money because I don't want to give them an opportunity to attack what I'm doing because they're also claiming to be apostles and they're claiming all this sorts of stuff because they're trying to boast in the things that we're doing. They are not apostles. We are apostles and we're doing the work of God. They're doing the work of the devil, but they're trying to cut me down. So let me read this sentence to you again. What I do, I will continue to do that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are, the things of which they boast. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. They're not really apostles of Christ. They are false prophets. They're deceitful workers. He's talking about people. He's not talking about sicknesses. Measles is not pretending to be mumps. These are false prophets who are pretending to be apostles. He says they are transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ, and no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness. So Satan's ministers are pretending to be angels of light. He says, whose end will be according to their works. Oh, they'll get it in the end, but they're his ministers. They're his messengers. So that's why in the very next chapters, he says, their thorn in the flesh was given to me. It was a messenger of Satan. He was just talking about them. He just sums it up. Remember those false prophets, well, one of them was actually following him around constantly and trying to tear down everything he does. And don't listen to Paul. You remember what Paul used to do back in the old days? And Paul used to do this and Paul used to do that. And some people who have pasts like that, Satan will stir up somebody to keep bringing up your past. You used to do this and you used to do that. Remember, because they want you to give up. They want you to say, oh man. And that's what this whole teaching is tonight. Don't give up. Don't give up. That's what Jesus was trying to tell Peter. Don't give up. You're about to give up. You're about to desert me. Just stay hooked to God because people come and attack you. Don't listen to them. Just keep doing what God told you to do. Okay, so that messenger of Satan was sent to buffet Paul, and he said he prayed 3 times. And I said, is there something magic in the 3? Why in the 3? Why was it 3? And I had to go back and look at it and try to think in context, what was Jesus trying to teach them? What did he want them to watch? So I looked back at Matthew 26:34, where just a few verses over, he says, Jesus said to Peter, assuredly I say to you that this night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. I went, oh, there's that 3 thing. There's that 3 thing. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. 3 times you're going to have an opportunity to bail. You have 3 times you're going to have an opportunity to give up. And I want you to watch what I do. So that's why he went 3 times. He just told Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. So I'm going to go pray 3 times because 3 times I'm going to feel like I should give up. And you're going to hear me say, Lord, if it was possible, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will. So he went to Peter, were you watching? Why are you asleep? Watch me. And he went back again. Lord, I'm ready to bail on this thing. I feel like if it was possible, I don't want to do it, but it's not my will, it's your will. He goes back to Peter. Peter, wake up. Watch. I've told you to watch. And he's literally mean watch. He didn't just mean something spiritual, watch and pray, but like watch and pray. So he did it a 3rd time. And he says, Lord, I'm ready to bail. That's what he's saying. Like, I'm tempted to just give up, but not my will. It's your will. I'm going to give in to your will. I'm not going to panic in the situation like Elijah panicked, like Jonah panicked, like Paul was tempted to give up because of that messenger of Satan, but he prayed 3 times, right? And then realized it's okay if I don't have the strength to do this. It's okay. God will give me the strength. I'm just going to stay connected to him. He's my lifeline. He's my lifeline. So he went and said the same words Three times in a row, three times he went back to Peter. So, and Paul talks about this in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7 through 8. He's talking about Jesus, who says, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. He's crying. I mean, this is legitimate. He's not putting on an act for Peter. He was allowing his humanity to come forward and say, this is, oh my Lord, what's about to happen? This thing that's about to be set in motion when I go to the cross and the death and all the persecution. I wish I could avoid all of this, but I can't. It's not my will. I'm going to do God's will, because doing it God's way, it's going to be a blessing in the end. And that's what we have to keep in mind, because there's a quicker way to do things. There's a faster way and a shortcut. If I just grab this money right here, I can go ahead and pay for my medicine. But that quick way is not always the best way. And just doing it God's way is always going to pay out in the end. So it says, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Right. See, and having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So he learned obedience. And sometimes we have to just go through hard things. We don't want to do our exercises. But that's how you're getting rid of that fat and that excess and all that other stuff by the exercise. It's hard. But it's building your muscles, right? It's making them stronger. It's the pressing against that makes us stronger. And so sometimes that pressure has to come to us and we have to press against it. And that is what's strengthening our muscles. So he learned obedience by pushing away that temptation, by pushing away those, and he was perfected and matured by it. So for the last time, this is verse 46. It says, then he came to his disciples and he said to all of them, are you still sleeping and resting? But really, he's saying it to Peter. In Matthew's version, he's saying it to all of them. But in Mark's version, which was given him by Peter, Peter clearly said he kept coming to Peter and say, Peter, you're the one. You're the main one. Stay awake. Hello. I'm working here. So behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. So look, it's here. I showed you what to do each time you're going to be tempted to give up. Each time you're going to be tempted to do the wrong thing. I showed you to say, no, it's not my will, God. My will would be to send down 10,000 of angels and strike them up. But it's not my will. It's your will. I'm not going to say any more than you tell me to say. I'm not going to do any less than you tell me to do. I'm just going to stay focused on whatever you're telling me to do, however you tell me to handle the situation. And that's what he was trying to train Peter to do. Okay, so he says, behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. So it's the beginning, right? So verse 47, and while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. So that's where he had just been. They all thought that Judas was out buying more food for the next day's Passover because he handled the purse. So only John heard Jesus say, the one that dips when I hand him the bread, that's the one who's going to betray me. So John was paying close attention to everything Judas did, but the rest of the disciples like, what's Judas doing here? Okay, so he came with all those people. However, he separates from them. In John verse 18, and because John's paying attention, in John chapter 18, verse 2 and 3, here's what John noticed. It says, and Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus also met with his disciples there. So Jesus had been to this Garden of Gethsemane. This is not the first time he'd gone to the Garden of Gethsemane. It was a nice place to go and pray. And Jesus probably had a deal with the person who owned that particular land. And it's sure, Jesus, anytime you want, you go there. So that's why they went there. No one else knew where Jesus was except for Judas. Judas had an idea of where he might be. Jesus had not said to everybody, hey, we're going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane tonight. Before Judas left, he's implying here, John's implying that Judas guessed that that's where he was because that's where he often went to pray. So he says, John chapter 18, verse 2 and 3, and Judas who betrayed him also knew the place where Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. I mean, it was very dramatic, right? They're all surrounding them, and there's a whole bunch of them, right? Now, back to Matthew, verse 48. Now his betrayer had given them a sign saying, whoever I kiss, he's the one, sees him. Now, what's interesting there is Jesus, you know how the Bible in Isaiah 53 says he had no comeliness or no form that, we should recognize him. It's like there was nothing special about Jesus. He came just as a regular guy. And so they wouldn't know which way. He was not like he glowed all the time. He did glow that one time on the Mount of Transfiguration, but otherwise Jesus was just a regular person on purpose. So he's not 6 feet taller than everybody in there because he's saying, I am just you. You can do this too. I'm doing this. I'm giving up all my rights and privileges, God, and I'm just acting as a man, and everything I'm doing, you also can do. So Judas knew that they would know which one he was. So it's okay, the one I kiss, that's going to be him, right? And so he's the one sees him. So immediately he went up to Jesus. Now he's separating himself from that group. They know later, they heard certain things and now it's all making sense to them. But this army of people showed up and Judas separates. So it's not like Judas is standing there in front of the legion going, ha ha! He brings them up, but then he separates them. So he whispers, hey, da, da, da. Then he goes up to Jesus like, I'm not with them. Right? So he says, immediately he went up to Jesus and he said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Just like, I'm just showing up. And the other disciples who didn't hear all that John heard, John had big ears. I just do want to say that. He heard everything. He wasn't those. He was in everybody's business. He was in the business, but it's okay because he ended up writing all about the business. So it was okay that that's what his personality was. So the other disciples have no idea what's going on, right? So he walks up and says, greeting, Rabbi, and kissed him. Now, here's what's interesting. This was kind of foreshadowed in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 9 and 10. It says, then Joab said to Amasa, are you in health, my brother? Now, let me back up. Like, who's Joab? Who's Amasa? Okay. Jeroboam and Rehoboam are fighting over who's going to be king. And they have split. Now, Amasa had said, hey, I'm going to go get some help. And I'm with you, Jeroboam. I'm with you. So let's just go out here and I'm going to find some people and I'm going to fight with you. But it took him a long time to get back. So Joab was looking for him. And so Joab says to Amasa in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 9, are you in health, my brother? Because he says, you said you were coming back. And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword that was in Joab's hand, and he struck him with it in the stomach, and his entrails poured out on the ground, and he did not strike him again. Thus he died. Wow. So he's like, you're a betrayer. You're the enemy, Joab. Now this is, Samuel didn't know. Nobody knew he was going to do all this. He just had this sword hidden. But he betrays him with the kiss. Hey, how are you doing, Amasa? And as far as anybody knew, Amasa was still on their side. But Joab had sensed the tone. And so he takes him by the beard and he kisses him and then he stabs him. So Judas is doing the same thing, being betrayed. That's why Jesus says, oh, you betrayed me with a kiss? Because I've been reading the Bible and I know what happens when somebody gives you a kiss. That means they got a sword in their hand, they're ready to get you. So now here's what's interesting to me. Verse 50, but Jesus said to him, how derivative. That is very funny. You're just repeating stuff. You're not even original, Judas. You could have betrayed me with a joke. You could have handed me you got a car, you get a car, and then, but no, you're going to betray me with a kiss? I've seen this movie before. Yes. So, but Jesus said to him, friend, why have you come? Now, Jesus is not asking because he does not know. There are times Jesus asks us questions because he wants us to think about it. Why have you come? Now I'm going to end there because we're going to get into to all of this betrayal stuff. But the important thing that I would like you to take away from the lessons is sometimes we want to bail, right? Sometimes it's too much. It's too much. And Jesus is like, I know. So stop trying to solve it. Stop trying to fix it. You've come up with 15 plans in a row and you've done this. And let it go. Let me handle it. I'm going to move in. I'm about to drive by in my car. But if you're in the car, your friend's going to drive by. If you're outside the car praising God, then your friend will see you and he'll stop. So if you're in there worrying, oh, how am I going to fix this? But just say, hey, I can't handle this. God's going to handle this. Thank you, Jesus. You're going to handle it. Just start praising me. Watch what I do, and see how I'm connected to God. And I'm saying, Lord, this is too much, but it's not my will. It's your will, and I'm trusting your will. Whew. So when it's too much, just give it to him. God knew it was going to be too much. He's waiting for you to hand it to me. Hand it to me. Cast all your cares on him, for he'll care for you. Let me carry that for you. I got that. You don't have to be carrying that. It's too much. Isn't it, Elijah? You go sleep now. It's too much. Isn't it, Jonah? You go sleep now. It's too much. So let it go. All right. So we'll take up. You're so patient to indulge me to go 3 verses at a time through this. But I don't want to miss what was going on. Jesus is not surprised that he's sleeping. I just want you to watch how I'm handling this, Peter. That's what that watch and pray was all about. Okay, so we will continue next week, and I'll see some of you Sunday at 9, and the rest of you next Wednesday. God bless you. Amen.